Nearly a fifth of the world's daily oil supply passes through a strip of water at its narrowest point, just 33 kilometers wide. It connects the Persian Gulf to the broader global energy market. And right now, that passage, the Strait of Hormuz, is at the center of one of the most delicate diplomatic standoffs in years. Today is April 18th, 2026. A ceasefire between the United States and Iran is technically in effect, but both sides are testing its limits, and the talks due to resume in Pakistan this week will go a long way toward deciding whether this pause becomes a lasting agreement or collapses into renewed conflict. For weeks prior to this ceasefire, the United States and Israel carried out a series of strikes on Iranian military installations and sites associated with Iran's nuclear program. Iran responded with ballistic missiles and activated proxy forces across the region. Shipping in and around the Persian Gulf was disrupted, energy infrastructure was hit. Regional governments scrambled to contain a conflict that was spreading faster than diplomats could manage. A 2-week ceasefire, mediated with Pakistani involvement, was announced earlier this month. It brought a pause, but it has not resolved the underlying issues. Most analysts who follow the region say the ceasefire is fragile, and the events of the past 24 hours illustrate exactly why. Iran declared the Strait of Hormuz fully open to commercial shipping today, but attached a significant condition. Iranian Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf stated clearly that the strait's continued openness is tied directly to the status of the U.S. naval blockade on Iranian ports. If that blockade is not lifted, Iran reserves the right to restrict passage. To be precise about what that means, the U.S. has maintained a naval blockade around Iranian port facilities and Iranian-flagged vessels, while allowing non-Iranian commercial traffic through the strait itself. Iran is now explicitly linking the strait's status to relief from that blockade, a form of negotiating leverage that carries real risk if talks break down. Separately, President Trump said on Friday that negotiations are advancing and that Iran has agreed to the broad terms of a deal, including the transfer of enriched uranium stockpiles. He described a potential agreement as very close, but he also warned that if no deal materializes by midweek, the United States may not extend the ceasefire. Those two positions, very close and may not extend, define the narrow window diplomats are now working within. The Strait of Hormuz is not merely a strategic landmark. It is a critical artery for global energy supply. Oil exported from Saudi Arabia, Iraq, the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, and Iran itself must pass through it. Estimates from the U.S. Energy Information Administration have consistently placed the daily volume of oil transiting the strait at somewhere between 17 and 21 million barrels, roughly 17 to 20% of global daily consumption. When the strait has been threatened in the past, during the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s, during rising tensions in 2012, and again in 2019, oil markets responded sharply. Insurance premiums for tankers spiked. Shipping companies rerouted cargo at significant additional cost. Governments in Europe and Asia scrambled to assess strategic reserves. A full closure of the strait is considered unlikely by most defense analysts, partly because Iran itself exports oil through it and depends on the revenue. But even a partial disruption through mines, harassment of tankers, or coordinated attacks by proxy forces could be enough to push energy prices meaningfully higher and create supply uncertainty across import-dependent economies. That matters for households in the United Kingdom and the United States because higher crude prices flow through to fuel costs, heating bills, and the broader cost of goods. The connection isn't immediate, but it is real. Talks are expected to resume in Pakistan this coming week. Based on public statements from both sides, the main sticking points are clear. Iran's enriched uranium stockpile is the central issue. Iran has accumulated uranium enriched to 60% purity, below weapons grade, but closer to it than under the original 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. The United States is pressing for that material to be removed from Iran entirely, or at least placed under strict international monitoring. Iran wants guarantees of what it receives in return before agreeing to any transfer. The naval blockade is the second major point of contention. Iran wants it lifted before agreeing to further concessions. The U.S. has indicated it wants verifiable steps on the nuclear file before easing the blockade. That sequencing dispute has not been resolved. The future of uranium enrichment inside Iran is a third unresolved question. Even if the current stockpile is dealt with, Any durable agreement needs to address what Iran is permitted to produce going forward and at what level of purity. Finally, there is Lebanon. A separate 10-day ceasefire there has been holding, but unsteadily. Israeli ground operations have continued in some areas, and any major incident could complicate the broader picture with Iran and its proxies in the region. None of these issues are simple, and none have obvious solutions that both sides can accept. That said, the fact that talks are continuing, that both sides have accepted mediation, and that Iran has declared the strait open, even conditionally, suggests there is still diplomatic space to work with. While negotiations proceed, the military posture on both sides remains significant. The United States continues to maintain a substantial naval presence in the region, including carrier strike groups capable of enforcing the blockade and, if necessary, responding to threats to shipping. American officials have described the blockade as a tool of economic and diplomatic pressure, not a precursor to further military strikes. Iran, meanwhile, has significant asymmetric capabilities. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy has practiced tactics for disrupting Gulf shipping over many years, including the use of fast boats, mines, and anti-ship missiles. Iranian-backed groups in Yemen, Iraq, and Lebanon retain the ability to launch drone and missile strikes against regional targets. Whether Iran deploys those capabilities will depend heavily on how the next few days of negotiations unfold. U.S. intelligence assessments, according to officials who have spoken to American media, have warned that if the ceasefire collapses, there is a real risk of the conflict widening, with Iranian proxies resuming attacks, potential counterstrikes, and the possibility of outside actors increasing their involvement. Russia and China have both maintained diplomatic contact with Tehran throughout this period, though the extent of any material support for Iran remains a subject of active intelligence debate. To bring together what we know as of today, Iran has declared the strait open to commercial shipping, and there are reports of tanker convoys moving through the waterway. That openness is conditional on the U.S. naval blockade being lifted, a condition that remains unmet and is subject to ongoing negotiation. President Trump has described talks as near a breakthrough, but has set an implicit midweek deadline. Core issues, Iran's uranium stockpile, enrichment limits, and the blockade remain unresolved. The Lebanon ceasefire is holding, but not firmly. There are broadly three scenarios analysts are watching. The first is a diplomatic breakthrough. If talks in Pakistan produce agreement on the core issues, particularly the uranium stockpile transfer and a framework for lifting the blockade, a more durable arrangement could be announced by mid-week. That would likely stabilize energy markets and allow both sides to claim some form of victory. It is not the most probable outcome given the number of unresolved issues, but it is not out of reach. The second scenario is a ceasefire extension without resolution. Both sides could agree to extend the pause while talks continue, buying time without resolving the underlying disputes. This has happened before in similar negotiations and would be viewed by markets as mildly positive, though it would leave fundamental tensions unaddressed. The third scenario is a breakdown. If talks fail and the ceasefire is not extended, the most immediate consequences would likely be a resumption of pressure on shipping and energy infrastructure, a spike in oil prices, and significant market volatility. The most honest assessment at this point on April 18th is that the situation is genuinely uncertain. The signals from both Tehran and Washington are mixed. The diplomatic window is narrow, and the consequences of failure are significant enough that both sides have a real interest in finding a way through. But interests and outcomes do not always align in international negotiations. The Strait of Hormuz will remain a central point of global attention this week. The talks in Pakistan, the status of the naval blockade, and any developments in Lebanon will all feed into how this situation evolves. We will continue to follow each of these threads as they develop. If the talks produce a result in either direction, we will bring you a full analysis. In the meantime, subscribing and enabling notifications is the most reliable way to stay current as developments unfold. The next few days matter, and we will be watching them carefully.